Working in this space, you know when someone is prepared and you know when someone isn't. You know when someone's organized and when they're not. You know when someone's speaking the truth or they just made it up on the spot. Like, listen to what the commentators say. I'm like, that's a really articulate way to describe a play or to praise a certain athlete's ability, and you take note of it and have conversations while you're still an athlete. If the world of media is somewhere that you do want to get into, because there can only ever be so many commentators.
Sera, welcome to the agency pod. Excited to have you. And you do a lot. You do a lot. Just to put that out there. And I think, you have a podcast with the ABC. You do commentating with Stan. You're about to do commentary at the Olympics. And you're an athlete. And you play for international and state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit on. There's certainly a bit on there.
Was this intentional? Like, how did you end up in this position where you had this many plates to spin?
Honestly, I have no idea how I've ended up here. This is not the life that I envisioned for myself when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I'm quite a chatterbox. My grandma used to tell me that I'd be great at being a bullshit lawyer. That's literally her words. You'd be a great bullshit lawyer. So the fact that I'm here now playing rugby internationally and having opportunities, so many wonderful opportunities in media, really only came about in the past 6 years. So it's been a wild journey, but I'm loving every minute of it.
So in that position that you're in, because you're heavily involved in media and playing professionally as an athlete, because you're in the limelight in two different ways, do you ever find that a struggle to compose yourself in a certain way? Do you feel pressure to behave a certain way?
I mean, ultimately, you always want to be perceived as a professional. So I think, like in both settings, I definitely know within the core of my being that I'm professional when I'm a rugby player and I'm professional when I'm a media presenter. I think sometimes it does create a little bit of a blurred line when, you're asked to commentate on your own team or whatnot. But it's tricky because you do have to almost be really mindful of the words that you use, because it's ultimately still your team. It's ultimately still your friends and the rest of it, but then you also have to uphold your integrity as a media presenter and share your honest truth. So finding neutral ground has been a journey, but I think for the most part, no one's tapped me on the shoulder and said, you're doing a crap job at it. So I think I'm on the right path.
And then how did you exactly slip into commentating? Because I feel like that's, not a common thing for all athletes to have access to. And especially so young in your career, you've had an opportunity to pounce on a few opportunities there. Like what's been, I guess, the defining moments that have allowed that to happen?
It's so crazy, Dane, because again, like I said, I never envisioned this life for me, yet alone if you told me when I was a kid that I'd be a commentator, like what? Like that's insane. People often see the commentary stuff, but they don't actually see how it all started. And my whole career in media was launched by ABC. So about 3 years ago, they invited me onto a show called That Pacific Sports Show as a guest. So I went on. I thought it was just amazing that there was a show dedicated to celebrating the excellence of Pacifica athletes like myself and our people. And I basically walked off that set and I thought, oh my God, how cool would it be to like one day be involved in a TV show, right? Because it's the first time I'd ever been on a TV show to be interviewed. And here about a few weeks later, I received a text, and I still remember the words within that text. Like, hi, I'm Nick Morris. Shout out to Nick Morris, he's a great man. I watched you on That Pacific Sports Show. I have a great opportunity that I'd like to speak to you about. Could we set up a time to chat? Long story short, he watched that one episode and I guess how I spoke or I presented myself, and offered me an opportunity to host a radio show on it called Can You Be More Pacific, with former NRL international Dean Hallertau. So I got stuck into that. I was so green, like so much so, Dane. Like when I first rocked up, I actually didn't know whether it was a radio show or a TV show. So I got my hair straightened and I full on had an outfit. I was like, so where we're heading, they're like, upstairs to the booth. I was like, oh, it's a radio show. Because I wasn't brave enough to ask, is this a TV show or is it a radio show? Anywho, I got up there, was probably doing that for a few months. And then I got a call from Channel 9, who are obviously associated with Stan Sports, from producer Andrew Swain. He's also a commentator, and was like, hey, we've seen that you've been doing some stuff with ABC. Have you thought about commentary? We have Bledisloe 3 coming up, which is obviously the Wallabies going up against the All Blacks. Would you be interested in joining our panel? So I was a little bit taken back because, again, didn't really think I was going to be good enough to really stay in that space. Said yes, and it's just been opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And it has been pretty tough because there was a time where the work was so plentiful that people were thinking, like, how can you afford to like quit your full-time job and just like be a media presenter? I was like, oh no, not yet. But life has changed so dramatically since then. And I now sit in a place where I can have the joy of being a rugby player and being involved in media, not having to do anything else outside of that.
I think it's really interesting how oftentimes in life an opportunity will present itself out of something that wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
Right? You were happy to be a guest on a show, did a wonderful job speaking, I imagine, and then scouted to do media.
Yeah.
And then one media opportunity led into another. And I think, obviously you have a knack or a talent to communicate. When it comes to having this mentality versus your athlete mentality, have they influenced each other? Like, for example, you being in a position where you're commentating and then being on the field playing, have they helped or hindered each other with your psyche in any way?
No, I think there's so much transferable skill within that. And I think the two words that come to mind is preparation and repetition. To prepare for any game, you have to be prepared, and that's ticking off your training load throughout the week, your recovery, watching your videos, seeking your feedback, studying the opposition so that you know exactly if they run this shape, this is most likely where they're going to hit or attack, or this is how they defend, etc. And then when I apply that skill of preparation to media, there is not a game that I go into where I don't look at that team list or I don't read up on that team for a few days leading in. And it's an intense preparation period, but the preparation ultimately makes you feel like you're ready. And that has put me in good stead. And I think, like you would know, right? Working in this space, you know when someone is prepared and you know when someone isn't. You know when someone's organized and when they're not. You know when someone's speaking the truth or they just made it up on the spot. And I think for me, like, integrity is such an important part of my life and my core values that I want people to respect me and what I do. And how I hope to achieve that is by treating whatever task they give me with respect. You give me an opportunity, you want me to sit in front of a camera and represent your network. That's huge. You don't want to let that down. You don't want to fumble that bag. So yeah, the preparation has definitely been a key part of that, and repetition. I think I'm so good at talking because I'm so good at talking to myself. I'm not kidding. Like, the amount of times I used to live in Campbelltown once upon a time, and I used to work in the city. So those are long drives on the M5. And I would sit there, and this is again before even ABC had first approached me, and I'd just ask myself questions like, oh, if you were asked this question, what would you say? And looking in the mirror, and I watch so many games of rugby and I listen to what the commentators say. I'm like, that's a really articulate way to describe a play or to praise a certain athlete's ability. And you take note of it and you just kind of repeat those words and they become your own and they become part of your own language. So the preparation and the repetition are so transferable between the football field and being in front of a mic or a camera. And yeah, I really pride myself on those two things because they've put me in good stead so far.
Is that inherent in you to want to put that much effort in, or did that come from, your parents or your brothers or your family? Like, where did this, I guess, need to prep and focus on repetition come from?
Well, I always knew that as a kid, I had a knack for things, but I wasn't very smart, if that makes sense. I was good with words and I was good with English, but with maths and science and the rest of it was really tricky for me. So I think because I knew the one thing that worked for me, that was the one thing I gave my all to. And going to address the part of my parents separated when we were really, really young, and it was a really rough upbringing. And so I think there's this deep desire to succeed because we went so long without having things that we wanted or desired. Not to say that my parents didn't do a great job. They did a phenomenal job with what they had. But I think when you're a kid and you miss out on excursions or, you can't afford to have the electricity on that week or whatnot, those things deep within you create this sense of hunger to want to succeed. And I think that is something that I've only really acknowledged probably in the past few years, is that this hunger to succeed and this desire to be great in my own life, not necessarily to anyone else, but when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm proud of the person I see, is because I remember all those times growing up where it was tough and we had to go without. And I think that just makes me want to work hard and make sure, again, that when I'm given opportunities that I really exceed in it, because ultimately I hold the power to my own life and the way that it's unfolding.
And I think it's interesting that you touched on your childhood. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in and out of foster care and domestic violence. And, I think I don't like to ever play comparisons ever. I think, we've all had things in our childhood that were difficult that we all have to come to terms with, especially when we're adults. Leading into our 30s, I think things come up we realize them. It sounds like you draw a lot of strength from it though. And I think sometimes people can dance with these things from their childhood, but like what kind of strength has that given you as an athlete and in your professional career in media? Like, are there constant moments where you draw strength from that?
Oh, 100%. I love that you like mentioned that you don't want to compare stories because I feel like every single person has been on a journey. I'm like, mine's mine. Like, mine's mine, and mine's like my story of growing up is what drives me to ultimately be better. But I draw strength from it because those hard moments can really define you. And I think you're a great testament to whatever circumstances you face as a child. Like, you have this brilliant business and you're booming in your industry. And like, so you didn't become a victim of it. And I think that's a really defining moment is, do you choose to surrender to your circumstances, or you just cop it on the chin because that's just life and you build something from it? And I hope to think that I've done the latter.
And it sounds like you have, because I think, you know, to go for a week without power, you know, as a child, it's like a bizarre situation to be in, because you, as a child, you will compare yourself to the other kids at school and what they wear and the kind of house they live in and all the rest of it. And I think, you know, there can be this gritty, competitive nature that comes out of you in adulthood where you're like, I want to make sure that I never have to experience that again or put my children through it or whatever. For you, when it comes to working in media and also, you know, being an athlete, just to stay on this thread again, do you feel a pressure to, like I said, behave a certain way, but do you find that it impacts your personal brand being in media and being an athlete? And do you think that it creates a narrative around what you're capable of doing and it affects either career?
I think ultimately it has always led. I've never thought of it being as a negative thing, having a presence in media and having an on-field presence. I think what it does do to my branding per se is it does create a bit of tension, because I'm like, oh, I don't want to post too much of media because they won't think I'm a footballer. I don't want to post too much about being a footballer because they won't necessarily think of me as a media personality, which is crazy because in the past 3 months, I've entertained more conversations where people have said to me like, oh, are you still playing?
Right.
And that becomes so offensive to me. I actually just read an article recently where they're talking about the upcoming Olympics and the commentary team, and they've called me a former international player. And I was like, I'm still current. And I think in this more present period of my life, that's where I find the tension is. I'm like, am I too much of one thing that I'm forgetting that I'm the other? Which is hard because I have always been a footballer before I've been anything else that I have established in media. So it does make me a little bit emotional because I'm like, oh crap, are they forgetting? But at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't play for the papers or anything like that. I get to wear the jerseys I get to wear because of the coaches that enable it, the people that I get to play with, and like that's okay. So I think if anything, it does also make me a little bit more conservative as to what I post. Probably close friends is what I post more so on my Insta, because it's hard because I'm like, how do you post? It'd be easy if I was just an athlete, but I'm not. I'm also a media presenter, but I think finding the balance of trying to post a bit of both is confusing, because I think sometimes when people look at it like, what do you do?
Yeah, people are trying to put a handle on you in a certain way where they want to look at you from a certain lens. And I guess being a current athlete and being in media is more of an anomaly than it is commonplace.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So then I think, you know, this can happen with a lot of branding, in personal branding, where people do 2 or 3 things really well. And it's difficult on how do they relay that message in a way that people can understand, oh, this person is a dynamic character. They're doing multiple things. So I think, you know, if you look at someone like Joe Rogan, who is a UFC commentator and a comedian and a podcast, you know, host and all the rest of it, like, you know, people kind of come to terms with what he is as a character because they get to learn that.
Yeah.
Have you had a strategy where you're trying to educate your community and your audience? Like, hey, I'm actually doing both out here.
Yeah, I think part of me wants to prove it so desperately that I'm many things. I'm not just this and I'm not just that. But I struggle to post sometimes on social media for like weeks at a time, because I'm like, I've done so many cool things this month, like so many cool things, but I don't know how to post it because it doesn't fit into what I've been focusing on this month or whatnot. Does that make any sense? Like,
Totally makes sense.
Because there's so many things that I'm doing, and there's so many great things. I struggle because I'm like, people don't just know me as being a media person. They know me as being a footballer. So again, going back to that conversation, if I just post the media, do they forget that I played for my club that I've proudly been at for like 10 plus years? Like,
Yeah.
you know? So realistically, I haven't actually found a strategy to the brand. I feel like my brain vomits, and that's why I just do so many Instagram dumps. Everyone loves a dump.
I think, Instagram is an interesting, like if we look at social media as a whole, it's a weird situation because it almost puts pressure on us to behave a certain way. Yeah. It's almost like act this way or act that way. You can't have both. And I think, this is a dilemma where how much does, social media at large affect athletes? So let's just put our athlete hat on temporarily here. Because I imagine these days, teams not only, and I'm taking a guess here, they don't not only care about you as a player, but they might care about how much attention you have and how much merch you can sell. What kind of pressure is on athletes right now to have social media and to have a public profile?
So much. There's so much pressure. I'll speak specifically to women's rugby. Because the sport is growing in our nation, it isn't as established as, say, the Matildas or the New South Wales Blues, who just had a sensational Origin campaign.
And for context, how long have those two teams been around?
Matildas have been here for a while. I don't actually know their period of when they started, but let's just speak about their popularity, right? In society today. People know who the Matildas are. The Sky Blues, they spoke about like a 25 million viewership on their 3-game series. That is insane. Insane numbers. You got Matildas selling out a match against China on a bloody weeknight. Like incredible times. Whereas what I feel like a struggle in rugby union is the exposure isn't there yet. So the pressure on the individual athlete to promote themselves is much greater. And it's not because you got governing bodies or organizations saying you need to promote it, you need to promote it, you need to promote it. I think the individuals come to realize no one's really promoting us or promoting me, so I'm going to take it upon myself and do it. So talking about the pressure, I don't necessarily think it's pressure, but we play an incredible sport. I am so proud to play rugby union. It is the greatest sport on earth to me. And all the girls that I get to play with are sensational athletes. I do feel sometimes, though, our story isn't told well or told often enough where people know who we are or anything like that. And we always talk about having generational effect when it comes to our sport. You can't be what you can't see. We want girls to grow up wanting to be rugby players, playing for the Tars, playing for the Wallaroos, et cetera, et cetera. However, girls can't do that unless they're necessarily exposed to it. Again, there has been great steps made in trying to expose the game, but it probably isn't. The profile of rugby union and our athletes aren't on par with the leading sports in our nation. And I think that is why athletes feel like they need to take it upon themselves to promote themselves, promote their teams, promote their games, promote where they're playing, promote what channel you can find it on. Like, you tell me, is a Penrith Panther posting where to buy tickets for this weekend?
No.
You tell me, is an AFL player telling us what stadium he's playing at this weekend?
They don't need to, no.
But women will, and female athletes will. So there's still this gap within marketing and branding and exposure of our sensational athletes that is still yet to be bridged. But until then, girls will always feel the pressure to promote themselves and promote their own game until we finally reach that place where they can just say, I'm excited, it's game day, and not necessarily post the time they're playing or where they're playing.
Are you finding that there's a shift happening? Are you finding that, as maybe difficult as this might be, that there's starting to be traction where this sport is starting to really scale and grow? Yeah, because I feel like there's more of a spotlight on female sports now more than ever. I think it's starting to spread into different sports and different realms. And even like if you look at, what's happening on Netflix, I don't know if you've seen Chains with the cyclists or, Drive to Survive with Formula One. I feel like people are starting to look at sports in a different way where it's not just the game being played, but it's like, what's the dynamic on the team? What's the relationships? What's their life like behind the scenes and all the rest of it? Even in cricket, we've got, microphones on the field now where we can hear all of the trash talk. So, so for you, are you finding that there's kind of too many gears changing at the same time, and it's putting an immense amount of pressure on these women to promote and play sport and try to think about their current career and their post-career and all of the rest of it?
Not necessarily. I think there is a lot happening. And just to answer like your initial question, I think there genuinely is a changing attitude from the public towards sport. not just women in sport, but sport in general. Like you're talking about car racing there. Football has been on an incredible rise here in Australia. Cricket has always been at the forefront of that. WNBL as well has been incredible. Like there are so many things happening. The perception of people thinking about, oh, like do girls play sport? I think that like that's a dying conversation. Like, come on, man. 25 million people watching a 3-game series. Like, come on. And that's not just talking about Australian viewership, like that's speaking of global viewership as well. So I think the perception is changing. There is a lot happening at one time. The access that you can have to teams and the access that you can have to athletes is probably more than you've ever had before. There's a documentary on everything. There's a documentary on the Springboks. There's a documentary on bloody the Panthers and their preparation to their 3-time premiership win. Like the public has never had more access to players and to teams and to the inner sanctums of elite sporting environments. And I think while it is a privilege for them to have access, it also is pressure for the people on the inside as well.
What kind of pressure are you seeing in the individuals, right? Because being an athlete is enough. Like it's a lot of prep.
I wish they just knew. I wish more of us knew that. Like to be who we are is actually
it's
just
enough. Yeah, like it's a lot to prep and to eat and to train and to be up early and to be, you know, dealing with injuries and all the rest of it. Then you add media. Then you add the pressure of society having, you know, access behind the veil, if you will. Like what are you seeing happen in the players because of this?
Look, while we can talk about media, there's so many good things that media does for us, right? And I definitely want to say that. Like,
well, let's talk about both sides then.
Let's talk about both sides for sure. Like, I think from what I can sense, people want to do more about personal branding when there isn't necessarily enough about them out there, which is fine. Because you know what? As an athlete, you have a time period or an expiration date on your career. You just never know when it's going to be. God willing, it's far, 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 far in the future. It could be a freak accident. It could be your contract being expired. It could be you're not the flavor of the season for your coach for the coming season, and he says you should probably go fly somewhere else. You know, so I think there's that fight to want to be seen. And isn't that like a basic need? Like you just want love and admiration and the rest of it, and that's fine. Like that should be on it. If you want to put something up about yourself, so be it. I think on the flip side of that is sometimes having the public have access to you can be a little bit diminishing because they can say whatever they want and there's no accountability. And I think that's a part that probably we don't talk about often enough is that people send you DMs and they say stupid shit. And again, you know it's a keyboard warrior and you can place all the facts around it. They don't know you. It's obviously a lie, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you just see someone who took time to bring you down. And I actually remember one of my early commentary gigs, and now I have a rule, like I won't touch my phone while I'm, or read DMs anyways, particularly requests if I'm on telly or live on air or anything like that. Because like someone just wrote to me and like, you should get off that couch. You have absolutely no idea about what you're speaking about. And the next time I looked at the camera, all I could think about was this person is sitting in their lounge room looking at me thinking that I'm an absolute joke and nothing that I come out of my mouth has any substance. And do you know how deflating that is? Because in your mind, you think you're something or that you have a worthy opinion and the person sitting at home is like, you're a joke. And so much so I'm going to tell you that you're a joke. So, yeah, look, I probably digress a little bit there. However, just want to paint like a real picture. Social media, when it's used in the right ways, is such a powerful tool. It can promote, it can empower, it can unite, it can celebrate. And then on the flip side of that, it can tarnish, it can deflate, and it can discourage as well. But you need to have measures of how you want to use it.
So for those out there listening to this that might be in the realm of sport or pursuing media or what have you, what's your advice in those times where people are saying these awful things on social media? Because like you said, you as an athlete and as a media presenter, you have self-accountability.
Yeah.
But then it seems like the public don't have that blanket of you need to be accountable for the words that you throw back. How do you handle that, and how do you, I guess, give advice to those around you on how to deal with these situations?
Filter your settings. Honestly, filter your settings. You ultimately get to tell people how much access they have to you. You don't want them to have full access to you, don't give it to them. Filter your damn settings. And there's other ways they can do it. Like I see now more and more often that athletes actually turn off the comment section. Like they may seem like small measures, but ultimately it protects you and they can't get to you unless you allow them to. So luckily in that technology space, there are measures in place that you can use to help. But I think, like at the core of it all, Dane, it's like you need to like have a really strong sense of identity, because sticks and stones, what's that saying? Sticks and stones may hurt my bones. Nah, my heart too.
I think it's true. Like sometimes, like even still, like I'll get just these like really rude comments, and oftentimes I get ones where they call me like a YouTube peddler, or like they're like, "Oh, you sell books." I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, "You try to sell books to people that are doing it tough financially." I'm like, "It's dude, it's $28." Like, you know what I mean? But like people just, I guess they're in a place where they're unhappy. And I tried to steal a page out of Gary Vee's book where he said, if you look at your audience and you love hearing the good, then you'll love relishing in the bad. But if you stop trying to listen to the cheers and you kind of ignore the cheers, you can also ignore the boos. So I've started doing that. I get praise online as well, and I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And I get boos online. I'm like, cool, whatever. Like I've learned over 5 years to just kind of be like, let's just turn the temperature down and just kind of ignore this and just do what I love.
Have you ever had a DM or request or an encounter where like it's really affected you?
Yeah, but what I started playing a game. So my game is, I call it equal force.
Okay.
So if someone comes at me with some really snipey remarks and they're trying to be like hurtful and rude, I'll equal force them by being sarcastic back. And I'll make a joke of it. I'll make a joke of something that they said.
Okay.
Right? So someone said to me the other day, they said, Dane, you should be more considerate on how you present your information because you could mislead people and da-da-da-da. Went on this like, just this rant about how I'm misleading my tribe.
Okay.
And then I said something on the taught of, you should be more considerate and understand the fact that this is social media content. I'm not giving a university lecture, da-da-da-da. So like, I was just like—
Equal force.
Yeah, I was like, equal force. So you could say this is petty, but this is my way of kind of just dealing with the hate.
I'm about it. I haven't reached that level of where people are coming for me
Yeah.
in that sense, but I like that.
If you look up James Blunt, the musician?
Yeah.
If you look up his replies to Twitter threads or to X threads, it's pretty funny. Like
the Woolies ones.
Yeah, the Woolies ones.
Oh,
you just
funny.
got to clap back a little bit and then move on with your day.
Transport of New South Wales, very funny lately. Very, very funny.
So
lately.
a little bit of equal force just makes you feel a lot better, but you could debate it's a petty thing to do. But anyways, moving on.
Nah, that's fine. Sometimes petty is pretty.
Petty is pretty. I think petty is a pretty way to do it. But yeah, I think social media, like I try to make it a game. I'm like, it's fun. Like people gonna hate, and the bigger you get, the more you get it. Yeah. So for you, have you found that as your career gets bigger, do you find that the pressure builds, or do you find that you get better at kind of handling it?
Oh, I certainly am much better now at managing the commitments I say yes to. I think when I was very much at the starting line of it, I was yes to everything. I was a yes woman. Like, I think I'm shout out to my employees that had to deal with me throughout that first 2-year period, because I was making all kinds of crazy considerations, being like, if I come in at 8, can I leave by like 3? And do you mind if I just slip out that same day because I just needed to take a quick Zoom call or whatnot? So I was just yes, and then just burnout after burnout after burnout. So now that I'm a little bit more older, I'm so much more mindful of what I say yes and no to, and I think a big part of that is rugby. The presence in my life has grown so much more. We are an incredible place where we started contracting players 2 years ago, and that becomes firmly my biggest priority every single week. And so making sure that I lock in recovery and can actually have dinner with my dad or go see my grandma, like small things like that become even more important to me than just saying yes to every event that I get asked to go to, So there's definitely been some maturity in the journey. It's such an easy thing to fall into when you're at the beginning because you're just so excited, right? That people want you. But something that I've figured lately is, like what's meant for me will never pass me. If I say no to one event, that's okay. I may not meet that batch of people ever again, but hey, there'll be something else in the future. And again, like bring it back to rugby is the recovery and their preparation and just like looking after myself so I can be the best I can be as a rugby player is paramount to anything else. And so I think that having that as my true north has enabled me to mature a little bit quicker in probably the past 18 months.
And then as an athlete, I imagine that, you're getting pulled in all these different directions, and a lot of people want time with you and all the rest of it. And I guess learning to say no is a powerful thing.
Mm.
If you were to look at your week as, let's just say 24-hour time tokens, like 24 tokens per day over the period of a week, for an athlete, like what do you think is ideal of where that time should be invested?
One, understanding your training load, and training for everyone differs, right? Some people are like, oh, I can just go to the gym and I'll jump on a bike after I do my lift and that's your cardio for the day. I'm Fijian. I'm not getting fitter on the bike. I need to go actually run. That's just the plain truth. Any coach that has had me will say the same thing. Like, I am much fitter when I'm actually on the field. So one, understanding your body as an athlete is crucial, and it's paramount to how you plan your week and your training load as well.
So what's a training load?
Training load is essentially your training program for the week.
So understanding your capacity?
Understanding your capacity, how many Ks you need to hit. Like they say, the more speed exposures, high speed exposures you have throughout the week, the less chance you have of injuring yourself. It's like you see it all the time. People want to do staff races and they jump off the line and they pull a hammy, busted their Achilles. Both are actually true. That just happened recently. That's not funny. It's really sad. But,
Sorry.
But you know what I mean? So as an athlete, you have to take all of those things into consideration. So for me, like just making it more personal, I know that I need to live 3 times a week. I have at least 2 field sessions, plus I need to run 2 remote sessions on my own, getting recovery into there because my knees just don't bounce back as quickly as they did when I was younger. So when I look at my week on a Sunday night, I know for sure that I'm training at least 5 days, including a playing day. Where does it fit? What media opportunities do I need to attend or honor throughout the week, and planning my week that way. So as an athlete, and particularly in a semi-professional space, planning is your best friend. And I'm pretty old school, I think. Like, I use a calendar, but the calendar, like if I actually don't have training in my diary for that day, it's almost like I won't know. So planning at the beginning of the week, having like a real thought process around it helps me manage it better. So as long as all the training's in, my recovery's in, if I have any medical appointments, team doctor, etc., that's all in. Whatever space I have outside of that I'm willing to give, then I'll say yes to doing X, Y, or Z. But I've just like recently moved back into the area that I'm currently living in, which is much closer to my family. And I don't know, man, like, does making you old just make you a little bit more sentimental? Like, I'm not even that old. Like, I'm just coming into my late 20s at the moment. But like the want and the desire to like see my family is higher than it's ever been. And I don't know, like I look at my grandma all the time. I'm like, you never know. Like, you actually never know. Like, life is here and then life can be gone. Like, who are we to say that tomorrow's going to be here? So like, yeah, again, like coming to that whole, I feel like I've matured a little bit more of late. The family piece has been a real big piece.
I think what you said there about family is true, because I had to come to terms with things that happened in my childhood, and I can look back on it now and draw a tremendous amount of strength from it. For a long time, I couldn't. And I think, one of the things that really helped me was what I call a reframe. And for those that don't know what a reframe is, if you look at, let's just say, a picture of a Ferrari, and you put a beautiful golden foiled frame around it, that picture is going to feel a certain way. Take the gold frame off it and put a neon frame around it, it's going to feel different. Yeah. I think when you frame something that's happened to us differently, you can take a different approach. Like if someone gets out of a car accident, one person could say, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And the other person could say, thank God I'm alive. It's perspective, right? For me, when I look back at my childhood and my family and those times where it was really tough, I have a mantra that I say, and that is that my mother was doing the best she could with the tools she had at that time. I genuinely believe that. Yeah. And I think as we grow and as we mature, we get different tools. So for you, when it comes to family, it's that emotion is powerful. And like you said, you've come into maturity recently, and family's changing, and how you feel about it has changed as well. Is that something that you were maybe ignoring and now has surfaced, and you can draw strength from it? Like, what's the dynamic there?
Yeah, definitely. I think reframing is such a powerful word to use, because that's definitely the language that comes to mind when I think about them of late. It's been a journey, And I think when I was early in my 20s, I definitely ignored it. And then I was like, oh, it is what it is. It's whatever. But then there's something about coming to your late 20s where I feel like all your trauma just comes to the surface. And
It does, man.
And you kind of have to deal with it. And finding peace and accepting things, people as they are, has been healing.
Mm.
And I think that's why it brings so much emotion, is because you spend, so long ignoring it or having this pent up anger. But when you take the time to reframe it and acknowledge that, your parents and your siblings and everyone else involved in your family unit, are humans as well, it softens your heart in a different way.
I feel that. And I think, for me, something I love, which is from Carl Jung, he says, first you adore your parents, then you reject your parents, and then you accept your parents.
Oh, preach, Dane.
Yeah, right? Because I had that season too where you reject your parents. You're like, they don't know any good, like this and that, and I know better, and I'm 16 and I got my shit sorted, and then you get older and you're like, hang on a minute. I've experienced this world and now I get it. Yeah. It's tough, man.
Definitely.
Yeah. So with your family, you come from a long line of professional athletes.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. And with both your brothers playing in the NRL, from what I understand, the Panthers and the Tigers.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel the pressure to play sports? Or was that a choice?
No, definitely a choice. The boys started playing, my brothers, Wes and Kev, both started playing when they were young. So a lot of my childhood is filled with memories, just being like that snotty kid on the sidelines, like climbing, machines, or just playing with all the other kids, not necessarily paying any attention to any of the footy that was happening. However, when my opportunity came about, it was in 2012. I was in my final year of high school. There was a bit of a call out because Rio Olympics was going to introduce rugby sevens as an Olympic sport. Australia went mad trying to find talent, and because I was attending a sports high school, they're like, do you want to try rugby? And I was like, no, this game is so confusing. Like, why do you guys always kick the ball away? Because rugby league, right, you get 5 and then you kick. Anywho, ended up trying that out, told my brothers about it, and they were pretty stoked for me, to be honest. They just thought it was pretty exciting that I wanted to try a sport that was a contact sport. They've always been really supportive. And I think growing up, there was never pressure. There was just immense pride, because Wesley in particular played at St. George in like such a magical era. Like you had the likes of like Matt Cooper, and I remember there was this poster, it was like Wes was on one side and Matt Cooper was on the other side, and I took like 10 copies to school and I was like, this is my brother, guys. Like just so much pride. And so now that I'm on this journey of sport as well, I probably find even deeper connection with my brothers, because they can empathize and they fully understand the setting of an elite sporting environment. They understand the highs and lows of selection. They understand, just all the things that come with being an athlete. There's never been pressure off their end. It's always been pride and support and so much love.
How old were you when you realized that you wanted to play professionally? Was that a slow burn or was there a moment?
There was definitely a moment. It was 2022, which isn't that far. Oh, sorry, that long ago. So women's 15s is obviously a semi-professional sport. So being able to pursue this in a full-time capacity at this moment of recording is not possible, because it's just not the way the game is built at the moment. 2022 was my year that I debuted for the Wallaroos. We went off to World Cup and it was such a special campaign. And on the back of that, there was news that was being shared to us as a group that contracts were going to be issued the following year, which was last year. And I just knew within me that I wanted a contract. I didn't know what the commitment was going to be. I didn't know what kind of time it would require, but I just knew I wanted a contract. And I'm so thankful that God had blessed me with one. And that's where there was a real light bulb moment from 2022, being like, if there is even the smallest hint of being able to pursue this and be considered as a professional, I want it. And so again, grateful I got one in that first year, and still on contract at the moment, and want to be contracted, as long as I possibly can be.
Did your brothers have any key advice that they had mentored you with over the last few years?
Not really. The thing is with my brothers is because the sport has been their life for so long, when we get home, even when I get home, we barely talk about rugby or league or anything else. Because they both live abroad at the moment, when they come home, all they want is family time. And I love that and I respect that because, to be honest, I think about rugby every other time. Like, I go to the toilet at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm thinking, like, I need to clip clips for my coach this week. Like, but when the boys are around, it's not like that. And I think that's what I love about our relationship is that, yes, it's competitive and we can do all the fun stuff together and we can definitely talk rugby if we need to. But what I will always remember about my brothers throughout my rugby career is that they've always been supportive. They've always been encouraging when there's that awkward text message like, hey, guys, like, I didn't make the game day 23 this week. It's like, it's all right, sis, love you. We'll go again next week. Like, those are the moments that I'll always remember and cherish.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, swapping hats back over to media again.
Yes.
Okay, so when it comes to media, I think this is really interesting because a lot of people want to start a podcast or, become a host on radio or what have you, or like be a commentator in the realm of sports. Is there a misconception in and among players about what it really takes to be a spectator or a commentator on sports?
Yes. People often people often try and enter media once they finish playing and say, I want to be a commentator. I think the biggest misconception is it's not just talking, it's presenting. And that's the key part, is that anyone can talk about code. Anyone can talk about how great of a tackle or provide detail, around a certain play. But the key component to sitting in front of a camera is the ability to present as well. And that's hard. It doesn't come easy for a lot of people because it actually means you have to look down a barrel. You have to deal with so many different moving parts, particularly when you're on live TV. You have a producer in your ear, you have cameras, you have lights, you have crowds, you have players. There's so much happening around you that it is a really overstimulating environment. However, what I think has helped me in my career is I often MC events. And emceeing events is great because it gives you, a live interaction, so you get a feel of a room. And you would know this, right? Doing massive keynotes, you know when you've got the room and you know when you don't.
You can pick up on the energy.
Straight away. You could be 3 minutes deep into your presentation and you know you've lost the room because that back table is talking. You become so aware, right, of the dynamic in a room. And
it's almost like you become the room.
Yes.
And you're like, this is itchy, this group at the back that aren't paying attention. Like, come on, guys.
And it kind of irks you too.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I've put my heart and my soul into this.
And then you get angry.
Yeah. And then you become passive aggressive over the mic. And then I do one too many shh to try and quiet in the room again. You get this, right? I'm not going crazy. You get this, Dave.
Yeah.
So again, why I'm saying that is I would almost encourage athletes to take as many live events where there's no camera to build up your confidence and your resilience as well. Because when you lose a room, you can host an event of 50 people, that's fine. Then it jumps to 300. Then it can jump to about 1,500 people. We've done it, right? But you know how to hold it. So I think when you can build your confidence of speaking in front of that many people or controlling multiple dynamics at one given time, it builds a presence and a confidence on camera. And I've had this conversation with people that are working behind the scenes in media this is the common misconception is athletes finish their careers and then they want to come into commentary, but they don't have the necessary skills. So that's why I think it is so freaking cool that I get the opportunity to present while I'm still playing, because once I finish, I already have the experience to do it, and therefore there's a trust between myself and whatever network I get to choose to work with, because she has a proven record of doing it.
In some ways, I feel like it would give you an edge.
Yeah.
Because you're on the field, then you're an off the field commentating, and you're like, how many commentators can really know what it feels like in the present day to be in the game?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like it gives you a little bit of an X factor.
It does. It's a really unique space that I'm in, and I fully acknowledge that, because again, you're more times than often just a presenter or you're just a rugby player. But the fact that I'm doing both and playing quality, high representative rugby, and at the same time getting to work with reputable networks as well, it's insane. And I know that this is uncharted territory, but the biggest thing that I'm most grateful for is that both worlds allow me to pursue the other at the same time.
And I like what you said about, getting a feel for the room. And I liken it to getting your sea legs, right before you want to go into the full brunt of battle, just get used to being on the ship, kind of swaying side to side and get the balance right. Because I think, now that I do big keynotes, I think I always draw strength from those moments where there was 20, 30, 50 people. And I'm like, you can create a bag of tricks with a small room. You're like, this one joke always works, or this one thing, or I can get the attention this way. I like that because I think anyone who wants to get into media, I think, try to do the small rooms, try to do the small settings, the emceeing. And I think that's a great way to get started, to find your voice and to become confident when there are lights and cameras and an earpiece and all of this overstimulating happening.
I think like just to add to that one quickly as well is like have conversations while you're still an athlete. If the world of media is somewhere that you do want to get into, because there can only ever be so many commentators, per network / team, etc. So if this is something that you want to pursue in your career once you hang up the boots or whatever your sport may be, start speaking to key people, like make the most of whoever your player development managers are in your club. Start speaking to the marketing person within your organization, just putting feelers out there, having your coffees, etc. I, again, acknowledge I've been on this completely unique path where I have been so privileged to be presented opportunities where I didn't go pursuing because I didn't even know I wanted this in the first place. However, it's not always going to be like that for everyone else. So if you're not already in the realm, but you have a desire to be in that realm, make the most of the contacts that you have while you're still a current player.
So as a current player, someone who's listening to this, what are some things that they could do actively, right? So let's say they've got their coaches, they're surrounded by all of this media and all the rest of it. How should they conduct themselves? How should they approach people? What are some common pillars or things that they could keep front of mind to help them?
Definitely define what you want. I think it's sometimes really flat when you get to go to meetings and they're like, so what do you want? You're like, oh, I don't know. Not to say that you can't figure it out with a mentor. Like, I'm not saying that at all. But kind of have an idea of what you're trying to pursue, because that will really narrow down the conversations that you have and the people that you want to network with. And then second to that, once you do that, think about the people that are currently in your world that can help support you get there. And one thing that players often do, particularly in rugby, is we underutilize our networks. Like when we get to go to these networking events, and I'm so guilty of it as well, you end up just sitting with your teammates. And there are a bunch of sponsors that are so excited to meet you and they want to have a coffee with you and they want to take you to their building and they want to introduce you to X, Y, and Z. And I've heard this from retired players, they say, once you finish playing, you will miss the networks that you had so much access to because you sat down in a corner and just spoke to your teammates like you couldn't speak to them the next day. And I think that is such a crucial thing, and it takes so much courage to put yourself out there, but be the one to pursue it. And try and think about, every team has sponsors, right? Every team has a sponsor. It doesn't matter whether you're playing under sixes, playing under 12s, or you're playing subbies, or you're playing first grade for a shit shield club. Every club has sponsors, and within those are reputable people or thinkers within their industry. So get to know them, take their business card, ask for a coffee. It'll take you so much further than what you think it will.
Beyond the actual playing of the game itself, when it comes to that networking in that room, what positive impact could that have? I guess your coach is watching, the people who own the company are watching. What impression and what ripples does that send throughout the entire organization when you're out there shaking the hands with the sponsors, collecting business cards, going for coffee? Do people see this as a threat, or do they see this as we need to prioritize her? What's the demeanor behind that?
I think the perception that it gives away is that you're engaging and that you care. And truth of the matter is, a lot of teams couldn't do what they do or go as far as they could if it wasn't for the sponsors that so generously put their hands in their pockets to support you and your teammates and your dreams and aspirations. So I think from a business point of view, they get exactly what they want. They want the engagement with the players, because I feel like you could speak to this better than I could, but a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs think that people that are involved in sport will be highly successful in their workplaces because they have all of those teamwork skills now down, collaborative working, thinking, etc. So I think from a business point of view, they definitely achieve what they want. And then I think from an organization as well, they think you care. You care and you engage and you want to be at those breakfasts at 7 o'clock in the morning on your day off, etc. So I think there's this trade-off that happens where the business or the sponsor ultimately gets what they've desired, which is the engagement and the collaboration with the play. And then from the flip side of that, the organization are they care. And that goes so far. That goes so far. Like you can't tell someone that you care about something without showing them. And I think the ultimate way of proving that to your organization is by engaging in the things that they ask you to do.
Well, one of my friends, Danny Allen Page, said to me that, you know, he ended up in the professional leagues playing soccer, not because he was the best player, but because he was shaking hands and he was making friends and he was more diligently hardworking, and that impressed the people around him more than how many points he got on the board. Do you think that these sponsorships and these relationships could close a contract for a player if they work the room the right way, or is it purely just the skill set on the field?
I feel like that's a really hard one for me to answer because the way that my game is structured isn't necessarily like that. I think having genuine relationship and engagement with your sponsors will always put you in good stead with your organization, though. Like, imagine having a disgruntled sponsor because you were rude to them. Like, what kind of perception that gives off to your organization? So, like, it's a really long-winded way of answering your question. However, the way that my game is structured, I don't necessarily think it's the who you know that'll close off on your contract. But I think maintaining those relationships are so important because, look, I don't want to bring up old things, but like we all saw what happened to Israel Folau. That was a disgruntled sponsor, and Qantas pulled their sponsorship from Rugby Australia. Like that was a huge moment for our game, for him as an individual. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that, again, it wouldn't hurt to always have a quality, genuine encounter with your sponsors because, again, there's so much they do and that takes your team further than what your organization can.
And I think I can only imagine, and I'm guessing here, but like if you were behind the scenes, you're trying to pick the draft of the players. If there are two that are kind of even keel, and one of them is really pleasing the sponsors, and the other one doesn't care, you know what I mean? I think when it's like a close rally, it might be that little bit of an edge.
I wouldn't know. I'd hate to be a coach and figuring it out, and him being like, "Well, she talks to the sponsors better, so she's getting selected this week, and the other one isn't." Again, I don't necessarily know how that would pan out or work out, but again, like teams always pride themselves on having good people. Like they always say, like good humans make good players.
Right, doing the right thing is always the right thing. Right. Sponsors have obviously put up money to be there. You know, it doesn't hurt to just, you know, I guess shake their hand and say hello.
Exactly.
Regarding post-career, how much does that networking in the room support post-career? And what kind of opportunities can athletes pursue beyond just, I guess, you know, commentating?
It's so crazy how much you could enhance your career post-playing by creating networks while you're still playing. And the thing is, rugby is a global game, right? So it attracts different businesses and different people, not just tunneled to one sector. And I think the value that you will get out of your networks is proven to go as far as you create your own networks. I don't know if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like your network can only go as far as how much you network.
Yeah.
So don't expect to go to England and, you know, sit in a senior position if you sat in a corner at a sponsorship event and didn't say anything to anyone. So you kind of have to go get it if you want it. And the connections that are readily available to you, plentiful. You just need to pursue it. Like I currently have a mentor and she's based in Melbourne. And we catch up about every couple months. When I'm in Melbourne, I'll go see her. When she's in Sydney, we'll catch up for a coffee. But when I look at her, she adds so much value to my life purely because of her mentorship. But outside of that, I know that she has worked in government. The organization she works for have global offices. So you're always thinking bigger picture, right? Like if I needed something, she'll be able to assist, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I can't really stress enough how important it is to try and network while you are still playing. Go to those events, go to the breakfasts, go to the lunches, get up out of the corner, go speak to the other person in the opposite corner, because you actually never know. Like people are so unassuming in this day and age. Like you look at CEOs these days and they dress just like you. And you think once upon a time they used to wear a necktie and have like a matching suit, but like every impression counts and every encounter could potentially lead to something crazy.
Yeah, you're totally right. Like it's almost like the rich people get, the more unassuming they become. Yeah. I remember I was at a networking party recently and I was just hanging out with a few people And I got introduced and they're like, hey, here's the CMO of Visa and the CEO of Coca-Cola. I was like, oh, hi. You know, like, and they just look like anyone else. That you'd picture these characters looking a certain way, but they're not. And I think, you know, one time many years ago when I was in my early 20s, I had dinner with a man who was quite wealthy, and he just showed up in an AC/DC shirt, ripped jeans, and a pair of thongs, and he gave me a piece of advice that always stayed with me. And this guy ran one of the biggest telecom companies in the US, and he said, Dane, your network will either help or hinder you dependent on how you nurture it.
Ooh, yeah.
And that stuck with me because he's like, if you're terrible to your network, the minute you need help, it's not going to respond. Yeah. If you're always giving and, you know, doing favors for your network, the minute you turn around, you need something, they're right there to help.
It's transactional, right?
It is transactional. Yeah. You got to plant seeds, you know, reap what you sow.
Exactly.
For you, I think, you know, I'm so fascinated by the position you're in with media. And I think, you know, how has it affected you as an interviewee, right? So you're going on a show to talk about yourself as an athlete. Being on the other side, has it helped you conduct yourself as an athlete?
Yes. Ask better questions. Honestly, ask better questions. It's crazy because as athletes, right, you get asked questions all the time. And now that I get to sometimes sit on the other end where I get to ask the questions, I just think like you can just be genuine and be true and not be so scripted and heavy. And not that producers ever want you to be that way. However, I think because I'm a player, I'm like, man, you ask like the same questions all the time. Pick a moment. Ask about the emotion in that moment. And I think that the exposure of being an athlete allows me to ask better questions when I'm on the other side and being a presenter. So it's fun. But I also have to say, sometimes I think about these wonderful, big, elaborate questions that I want to ask. And then as soon as they're like, Sarah, to you in 3, 2, 1, that question goes out of my mind. And I ask something completely different that I didn't even think about or thought I cared about. But crazy how the brain works.
It's weird, right? Because I think, you know, having a podcast has taught me a lot about, you know, people have different energies and they have different ways they like to answer questions. And, you know, everyone has different boundary lines and all the rest of it. So it's part reading the person. It's also part like trying to figure out how do I structure this question in a way that resonates with them. It's like, it's so many layers. Like you said before, you get the lights, the earpiece, everything is all happening at once. How do you find that you can prepare yourself to be in media? Like, what are some things that you like to do to get yourself prepped to make sure that you're ready the second that the lights are on?
Media training, I feel like, is such a vague term to use. However, in most elite sporting teams, that is readily available. So I'll definitely say like media training. The other part, which is really hard, is you need to get someone who is a seasoned campaigner to critique your work. And when I first jumped on radio, I used to have a guy that used to call me once a month and he would listen to some of the weekly episodes and just give me feedback. And the more feedback that you get, I know sometimes it can be a little bit daunting because it can be critical, but that's the way that you keep yourself as, I guess, coachable in a way and continually hone your skills. So get training if you can get training. If not, whatever work that you do, just get someone to critique it. And something that one of my friends taught me is, say, for instance, if you wanted to be a commentator, pause, let the play-by-play happen, because as we know, play-by-play details every single thing that happens. And as soon as there's a stoppage, put the TV on mute, and what would your comment be? And like you can practice in those small moments. And the amount of times that I find myself doing that, even today, is so valuable. Because if you think about the game of sevens, right? Sevens is so fast and so quick. And as a second voice commentator, I can only speak in stoppages. So essentially if they knock the ball on, go for a scrum, go for a line out, or if they're running back after they've kicked their conversion. So your time to speak could be as long as 15 seconds and sometimes as short as 5. And sometimes you might not even get in. So you need to learn how to be quick. You need to be concise, and you need to find as many adjectives. This is for real. Find as many different adjectives if you can to describe a certain thing. Quick, everyone in sevens is quick. Imagine if you're listening to me for 14 minutes, every time I spoke, I used the word quick. Boring, right? And this is a piece of valuable advice I got is think about 5 different movements or 5 different attributes that are consistent throughout rugby. It might be fast, it might be dynamic, it might be skillful, it might be visionary, whatever it is, and then another 5 words to explain that exact same thing. And then you keep that out there, which is something that I do. You keep the words there. So you look at it. So I could be looking at Dane. Dane's just made a man like, look, no, I wouldn't say mad. He's made an insane line break, simply visionary, because he could see the space on the right-hand edge. You could see the support coming through and look at another word. That was just, I don't know, like they're reading off the same script at the moment. But you just have, like, you have to just load yourself up with words. You have to load yourself up with moments, because in rugby, while yes, every game is different, there's nothing new. Every single play, every single mistake is something that you've already seen. It's just your ability to be able to detail it in a way that can resonate with the viewer.
Yeah,
Sorry, that was insane.
I love that, because you're going deep there and you're adding to the moment. So like as you're commentating, like you said, you might have 3 seconds, 5 seconds, something's just happened.
Yeah.
And the window for you to capture that moment and narrate it is so finite. So you're saying that rather than just relying on the same batch of words, you want to expand your vocabulary so you can communicate different things slightly different ways.
Exactly.
Because if you say rapid, that means one thing. Quick means slightly another thing. So even the adjectives you use can slightly change how what you said feels.
Definitely. And like you can load yourself up in the moments. And the reason why I came across the whole adjective things is because it was 2 things. One, when I was getting my radio critique every month, he said I used the word absolutely in almost every response that I had. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It's like you need to find a new word. And then second, when I came into Seven's commentary, Sean Maloney, who is a Stan Sport play-by-play commentator, incredible man, love him. He said the same thing to me. He's like, you need to find different ways to explain the same thing, because the game is so rapid and it moves so quickly. You don't want to be using the same batch of words, because more likely people are inclined to watch 14 minutes of rugby as they are opposed to 80 minutes of rugby. So they're listening and they're engaged. And the other part of like being in the moment is often when you watch highlights, that you have to be quick and your energy matters so much, right? And that's another part to it, is the range in your voice. Like, can you ride the wave of an exciting play? If there's not much doing in that play, can you still find a moment to honor that play? Because it's still a big deal for them to put on their jersey and represent their country on a global stage. So there's so many different elements, but the more that you can seek feedback, it honestly, it creates a different element and adds another layer to your commentary and to your style.
So when you're doing commentary, do you have people you aspire to learn from, and who do you look up to?
I love that you've asked this question. So Ricky Swannell, she is a world rugby commentator. She's based in New Zealand, and she is, in my experience so far, the only play-by-play female commentator that I have worked with. And it is such a unique space, because there are many play-by-play commentators, but even shorter numbers when it comes to female play-by-play. And I just think she's a professional. She's so kind. She's empathetic when we get to work together. And I just have so much respect for what she does. And on the flip side of that, I really just admire like the people that I get to work with. Like my friend, one of my closest friends, Tassie, she always says to me, do you ever take a moment to actually think like this is your life? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you get your makeup done like on a Monday, your hair and makeup done like on a Monday, you work on a TV show, you come to training, and then you go to a game on a Friday and you're on the field and you're interviewing players, and like, look at the people that you work with. Like we used to watch them on telly growing up. Like those are the people you get to work with. I just think, oh yeah, true. That's so cool. Like you don't often like take a moment to reflect and really acknowledge like the journey. And I just think the people that I get to work with, whether it's at ABC or whether it's at Stan Sport, like I love them. And I think they're just complete professionals. And in all honesty, it's a joy to be in their presence and share this work with them.
Do you watch a lot of games that are like recorded and practice commentary?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I have the Olympics coming up, kicking off on the 23rd
Congratulations,
of July.
by the way.
Thank
That's
you.
so exciting.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm going
Do you
to
feel
the
extra pressure? Like, it's the Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the world's biggest multi-event spectacle. Like it doesn't get any bigger than the damn Olympics, which I'm really excited about. I think my preparation hasn't necessarily changed, because the same way that I would prepare for like a stop on the World Series is the same that I'm doing this. However, because Channel 9 obviously is the broadcast for Australia, the thought of my voice being on free-to-air TV and is accessible by as many Australians that desire to watch the Sevens is like such a cool thought. So I've been practicing, I've been trying to hone in and just watching a lot of old Sevens commentary to be like, I like that, I don't want to do that. And also listening to myself. Man, there's nothing more humbling than listening to yourself.
I hate nothing more in this world
Honestly.
than listening to myself, because I've sat on this podcast and done a bunch of episodes, and I'll sit down and I'll listen to myself. I'm like, this is so annoying. Why did he say yeah so many times? Why is he going, what's up with that facial expression?
That's a thing, right? When you think it's engaging, right? When you say,
yeah.
And when I was working on radio, my producer said to me, you need to stop agreeing on air. We get it. I was like, but I just want them to know that I'm engaging, but they don't realize, or we don't realize that is actually really disruptive to the listener.
Because in a conversation, it's normal.
Certainly.
Like if you're hanging out with friends, you'll be like, yeah, back and forth. But then when you're listening to audio and you're trying to listen to someone be interviewed and you just hear, yeah, it disrupts the whole flow of it.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
See right there.
Cringe moments.
Yeah, so many cringe moments when you watch yourself back. So when you watch yourself back, what do you look for? What do you try to pick up on? What do you try to adjust?
When I listen to myself or watch myself back, the amount of filler words I use, like I try to get rid of it. And I think I don't always nail it. Sometimes I'm like, that was great. No arms, no R's, clear, concise, decisive in my language. Another part I look at if I'm looking at myself on telly is my eye contact levels. You're sitting here. Why am I looking here? Why am I looking there? Why am I looking at the roof? The roof seems to be my default. I look up at the roof. Like the roof is going to ask the question for me. So the filler words, the eye contact, and the body language. I hate this. I hate slouching on camera. I feel like it looks so lazy, you're not engaged, you don't care for it. So the posture. And then the questions as well. A lot of the work that I do on ABC is asking questions coming in and out of packages, etc. How well do I transition? How can I transition from a conversation to auto cue? You know, there are things that the viewer at home probably won't necessarily pick up on, but there's stuff that you notice in the moment that you think, okay, I could be tighter there. Well, that was good. I'll do that again.
Do you find that like being hypercritical and having a coach and someone kind of go over your broadcasts and feedback has sped up how good you are at it?
Definitely. I think there needs to be, there's a part of me that I think everyone kind of has is like, what I'm doing isn't good enough yet. And so you're seeking ways constantly of like, how can I be better? How can I improve? And I think the more that you allow yourself to be a sponge, obviously having some boundary of being able to protect yourself and having a sense of self has definitely developed that. But no one really wants to speak to someone who thinks that they know it all. You know, and again, like I still to this day, and I fully believe it, that I'm still green in this space. Like I am such a rookie, but I am happy to be a rookie in it because I don't know everything and I still make mistakes, which means I still need advice.
I would agree with that. And I think, you know, I always try to take the mentality of if you want to be a true master, you have to always remain a student.
Love that.
Always.
For every student.
Always remain a student. Do you find when you're actually playing that you commentate yourself when you're on the field?
Yes. Particularly these days. It was so humbling. I was like coming off the bench for most of it. So I was sat on the bench with our finishers and I would like talk about a moment and the girls would turn around being like, you're in your stupid commentary mode. Like, just be here. And I'm like, what? It was a great run. Like, did you see how great she was at the breakdown? Like, that was a great technique, blah, blah, blah. So I find when I'm particularly on the bench, like I commentate so much more. But it's not that I'm commentating in the moment. It's just your awareness to recognize a moment or something that could change the momentum of the game is like, it's greater. So when I'm on the field, I feel like I'm a little bit more mindful of like my body language or whatever, because I know those are the things that commentators look out for, etc. So probably subconsciously, the knowing of how media works does seep in when I'm playing. But then at the same time, like I can't help it if I'm breathless and my hair looks crazy and the rest of it, like this is me in my element. Like honestly, I have completely made peace with the fact that I am not an attractive rugby player. Like I'm just a rugby player when I'm out there. My hair is crazy. I've got tape everywhere. I've got tape on my knees, tape on my head, tape on my wrist. It is what it is. I'm so fine with it.
It's on brand.
It's on brand, rugby player.
Yeah. So when you're on the field, what are some things that you can do to get more attention from commentary?
Oh, have a good game.
Just be good.
Just be good. Look, to be fair, like commentary isn't necessarily about just highlighting the end goal, the try, the whatever. It's about moments, right? And I don't necessarily think on the field, what can I do now to get more like airtime from the commentators, etc. I just think about my team and like what I can do, because the last thing you want to do is who cares about them, because at the end of the week you have to sit in a review, and if you didn't own your moment, whether it's in attack or defense or in set piece, like that's who cares about what the commentators think. It's your team that you owe it to.
I like that mentality, team first.
100%. Like I feel like there could be like this misconception sometimes, like, oh, you're mindful of like the media and all the rest of it. You can't do two things at one time. Like when I'm on the field, I am fully there with my team, thinking about the jersey on my back, etc. And then when I'm in media, I'm not necessarily thinking about anything else other than what I'm doing at that present moment.
So with your team, are there things that you try to do as an individual to get your team fired up, to bring the energy and the frequency up, and can even an individual of a team do that?
There are definitely different energy types and personalities within a team. I'm not the let's go person. Nope, not me. What I will do is I like to play this Church by T-Pain before we run out for warm-up.
It's a great song.
A freaking great song.
Yeah.
It's grooving. And that kind of gets the team going. So I'm not necessarily a big speaker. Like I speak obviously a lot, but I'm not a talker in like the huddles. I'm not the person that's like trying to ramp everyone up. There's time and place for it. Our leaders already are assigned. Captain will speak. Whoever she's asked will speak also. So for me, the way that I feel like I can best support my team in terms of energy is like, one, playing that song before we run out for warm up. And two, is just being really encouraging when we're out there. There is so much head noise that happens throughout the week, so much doubt that you have, even when you're running out there, like warming up, looking at the opposition, the stadium starting to feel in a little bit. And I've picked up on it is that like, if we do something really great, I'm like, bloody hell, you're a world-class winger. Like that right there, like that's a bloody scrum. Like it's a great day to be a Waratah today. Like there are things like that I feel really encourage the girls. And I don't just say it in vain. I say it because in my heart, I believe it and I believe in my team and I believe in what we're trying to do. And yeah, it's been an amazing season and I'm so grateful I get to do it with them.
It's so exciting. I can only imagine being in the middle of a game. Maybe you're having a bit of a rough moment in the game, but then you have a little moment where you won something and then you just hear that comment. It just picks you back up and gets you to refocus. And I think maybe that would really help someone's psyche out there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And like on the note of psyche, there's been so much emphasis on having mental fitness coaches in your elite spaces. And we've been really fortunate in both Waratahs and Wallaroos to have one. And I also have, like I see him personally as well. His name's David King. Shout out DK.
Shout out DK.
Shout out DK. But I have been in test matches for Australia where I've genuinely thought I've lost us the game. And I've looked at our fluff. I'm like, I'm freaking out. I've just fluffed. And she's like, it's okay. We'll get the ball again and I'll kick for territory. Do you know how much that does for you in a moment where you genuinely think you've lost a game for your country? Insane.
Just that person who's by your side to be like, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll make mistakes. We'll go again.
So before you said you had someone to help you with, I guess, your mental fitness as a coach. What does that mean for you? What's that done for you? And how has that helped your career?
There are so many things that you experience as an athlete that you actually don't know how to navigate on your own. Head noise, doubt, self-worth issues. There's a plethora.
What do you mean by head noise?
Head noise is the voices inside your head that probably take you away from a positive sense of self. It could be doubt, it could be worry, it could be, again, that feeling of not feeling like you're good enough to be where you are, or having the right tools to accomplish whatever the team is trying to set out to do. So having someone like DK in our corner who mentors us and gives us more tools of how to deal with our own head noise has been life-changing. And I think another part that people don't often talk about, which has definitely been a big part of my journey, is the highs and lows of selection. Is at the end of the day, in a game of 15s, only 23 players get chosen to play. And if you're not part of that, it can really take a hit at your sense of confidence. But something that he told me a few years ago, which has stuck with me since, is don't surrender your identity to a team list. And I think that is so powerful and has meant more to me in this current season of life than it has in my entire footy career to date, is don't surrender your sense of self. Is because while I am a rugby player, I am not just a rugby player. And my rugby playing career isn't just defined whether I make that team list for that week or not. There's been so many wonderful moments. Don't surrender it to that 1 week of non-selection or that campaign. So it's tough sometimes because when people are trying to be really positive, you're like, yeah, shut up, man, but I'm not playing this week. And it can really suck because you're like, man, I've just given just as much as everyone else this week. I just have been really unfortunate. But I think constantly grounding myself in where you're surrendering your identity has been quite refreshing.
So you mentioned DK. What are some of the tools that he's given you to deal with the head noise and to not surrender your identity to the list?
Visualization has been a big thing. I remember a key moment. It was in 2022. We were out in Auckland and we were about to play a Rugby World Cup opener against the Black Ferns, who were the hosting nation. I had a really up-down selection kind of season, and that game I was named to start. It was my debut test start, and it was the Rugby World Cup opener, which was huge. Like for me personally, I was like going through all the emotions. And I'm a second rower and was calling the lineouts. And I remember we were all sitting around in a circle. And it was like, imagine like you're here in New Zealand, you're on New Zealand soil. There are going to be many black jerseys. And it was a sea of black jerseys that night at Eden Park. How are you going to deal with these moments? Like, you got to visualize, you got to prepare yourself. You've got to preload your brain to be prepared for that. And and he goes, does anyone want to voice anything? I was like, sat there in a corner. I was like, yeah, I do. I do want to say something. What do you want to say? I said, well, I keep having this thought that, how about if I call the line out and Adiana, who was our hooker, if she can't hear me, and like, we fluff up a line out, like how's that going to work? I've never played against the Black Ferns. 2, yet alone at Eden Park. 3, at a World Cup. Like, what the hell? Like, how about if she can't hear me? No one can hear me. And then Addie just looked at me and said, Sarah, if that happens, I'll just put the ball down. And I'll come to you and I say, I can't hear your call. What's your call? And those moments of him hypothetically proposing a situation, allowing us to think what happens if I was in that moment, allows you to prepare yourself for it. And again, it's the visualization has definitely helped him playing against some of the tough teams in the world, playing against England, even though we haven't had a win against them, playing against France, where we had a historic win last year. Like, there are so many moments that you think, what would I do in that moment? What would that moment of greatness feel like? That has definitely helped on the journey. And journaling. Love to journal.
So you love journaling as well.
Yeah.
So I'd like to come back to journaling. With visualization, we hear from some of the biggest athletes of all time, like Muhammad Ali talked about this, Michael Jordan talked about it, Conor McGregor talked about seeing the finish of the fight before it even happened. And there's these moments where you're like, that can't be real. This visualization piece, what can that do for an athlete? And how many times have you seen that transpire in reality because you've thought about it?
Oh, it has been so crucial in my journey, and I don't necessarily see the final outcome. What I see is all the things I've done to achieve that outcome. The ways that I reinforce that individually is, in this day and age, a lot of our sessions are actually, and games are all recorded. So what I do, particularly in a test week, is I'll go through and cut up all of my best moments. When I banked a line out, that clean delivery, clean catch off my chest, a strong scrum, a try in training or whatnot, and I'll stitch them all together and just watch that repeatedly. Because even though I can't see the final outcome, what I can see is the repetition, and the repetition to not fail when I'm in that moment. And that's what I do. And I think visualization for athletes has become a way to rebut certain moments that you may think you haven't done enough. Because the visualization is proof that I can see it, I believe it, I can see myself in that moment, I'm prepared for that moment. So when in that moment, I know exactly how I can do it.
Yeah, you're reactive in the right way because you've premeditated it.
Exactly. You've preloaded your brain to be prepared for that moment.
And then with journaling, because I think this is interesting as well, something I've done recently, which is I journal the second I wake up.
That's great.
It's weird what you write down. Like, you just pen to paper, you just start writing it like, whoa, this is what's going on in my head. How do you look at journaling, and how has it helped you?
I look at journaling as the freest way to express myself, because you just write. You're not thinking about what someone might think or might say. It's just you and a paper, and your hand just goes. Journaling has been such a freeing way for me to express some dark things, enjoy some great things, but it's free, it's accessible, and the release that I get from journaling is so therapeutic to me, even more so than if I was to speak to someone about what I was going through.
I would agree it's quite cathartic, because oftentimes you'll have something in your head that feels horrendous.
Yes.
And then you write it down and you're like, this is kind of ridiculous and small. In your head, it's this giant monster, but on the page, you're like, well, I know what to do about this.
Verbal diarrhea on paper. That's what journaling is. Verbal diarrhea on paper.
What have been, I guess, some of the darkest moments that journaling has allowed you to remedy?
Oh, I think the self-worth piece has probably been something that journaling has helped with. Yeah, the self-worth piece is definitely a big thing. And then like more personally, just stuff that you go through in your personal relationships. I think that's the hardest one, right? Is because the people that you have relationships with, particularly those personal ones, are so close and you love them dearly. And then you think, oh, shit, I think that, I feel that. But then you put it on paper and put it into a little bit of perspective and you have a little bit more understanding as to why you feel that way. Because it's hard to talk about some things. It's not as easy. People always talk about like, just talk to someone, which is fine. You can absolutely do that.
There's always a filter though.
Always. There's always a filter. Whereas journaling, there's no filter. It's you v you.
Why do you think we filter ourselves even with those we trust most?
Managing a perception, bit of self-preservation, definitely. The thing is, there are some people that we would feel absolutely no need to want to filter things with. But even with some of my closest friends, I realize I do filter. Because don't we all bloody filter? And again, for those two things, what will they think of me if I say this? If I say this, will it question the way that I've said, or if I say this, does it put into question my previous stance on it? So definitely managing that perception and a bit of self-preservation. Like you don't want to bear all because I don't want a vulnerability hangover. And that's a real thing.
Do you find that there's like one or two people that you tend to go to in those moments where you're like, I do need to talk to a person, and who's really been there for you throughout your career the most?
I think the most consistent part has definitely been my big sister, Rhonda.
Shout out to Rhonda.
Shout out to Rhonda. I love my sissy, Rhonda. Again, my parents separated when we were really early, and from a very young age, she just had to assume the role of being a mum to me, and that she has been. She's been one of the most consistent figures in my life, and I definitely went through a period where I absolutely hated my sister. Like, who doesn't go through that period? I just think, gosh, you're so vain. Like, she was going through this period where she had like this lip piercing and was constantly taking photos of herself. And I used to think, how self-centered could you be? But bless, I love her. She's given me two beautiful nieces. But she has been a rock for me. She celebrates the highest of highs. She's there when life doesn't necessarily unfold in a way that is happy. But she's a constant in every season of life, and I could not love her more if I tried.
That's beautiful. Almost poetic.
Thanks, Dave.
Definitely for sisters. I agree. From what I've heard. Two more questions for you. What does it mean to put on the Australian jersey and then sing the anthem?
Oh. I heard this saying a few years ago and it has stuck with me since. The jersey will make you feel the happiest and it'll also break your heart. And the elephant in the room is at the moment, I haven't been selected to tour with the Wallaroos. But the one thing that keeps me on this path, despite the challenges that I'm currently facing, is the feeling you get when you put on that jersey. It is this feeling of satisfaction, a deep, deep sense of pride. And it's the ultimate goal in rugby is to play for your country. And I've been so fortunate to be able to do that. And then thinking a moment further from that, you come back out from under the tunnel, you're standing side by side with 22 other girls, looking back at the rest of your squad and your coaches, and you can see a bit of your family or fans in the crowd, like off-key singing. It's beautiful. Honestly,
Yeah.
it is one of the most finest moments that you can have in your career. And I've been so privileged to be able to do that a few times already. And God willing, there'll be a few more to come in the coming years, or hopefully this year. Who knows how it all pans out. But there's no greater sense. Like, you just think about everything, the trainings, the early mornings, the sacrifices, the setbacks, whatever it is. And then 23 get given, or have earned, I should say, the responsibility to represent our beautiful country with a coat of arms in their chest. It's beautiful.
So that moment, and it's unfortunate where you don't make the cut. There's two ways of looking at that. I'd imagine one's quite dark and one's quite inviting. In that particular moment, do you dig deeper? And do you kind of create like a internal vendetta, like next time, like I'm going to make the cut? How did you respond to that?
Definitely a element of you thinks, I'm down, but I'm not out. And inviting is such a great word to use to describe it, because there is a challenge. You can either bow down and say, whatever, okay, it is what it is, or you can fight again and go again. And I was just speaking to one of my beautiful friends who unfortunately has missed selection this week, and she was pretty discouraged about it. And I just said to her, I promise you, you'd much rather have missed out and be inside of that camp and get to train again tomorrow with those girls than staring from the outside in, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. And I think that bit of perspective helped her, but it also encouraged me, because I think I'm down, but I'm not out. And everything in life is a little bit fickle, right? Who knows what happens in the next few weeks? God willing, everyone remains in good health, and I'd love that as well. But if you have so many no's, your yes has to be coming, right? And that's what I feel like is keeping me on this path at the moment, is my yes is coming. It's just whether or not I'm patient enough to bide my time and keep chipping away at it, even if it looks pretty grim at the moment. And I know it'll come. I fully trust that it will come.
I believe our greatest tests become our greatest testimonies.
Preach, Dave.
Yeah.
You got so many great
Let's
sound
go.
bites today, brother.
Let's go. Okay, I'm going to bring up one of yours that you mentioned recently. And this is a quote you shared of someone else from Morgan Harper Nichols. One day you will look back and see that all along you were blooming.
Ooh.
You shared that on Twitter or X.
Me? God, I'm profound.
That's a very prolific quote. What does that mean to you?
One day. We're soil, right? Think of our lives as soil. Constantly planting seeds and we're reaping the rewards. And everything that blooms will die, right? And I'm just such a big believer, and it kind of ties this nicely with a passage of scripture in like Ecclesiastes chapter 3, where it talks about there's a time and season for everything. And I think that is such a beautiful way to continually ground yourself, is that while there's a time to be happy, you know that sometimes sadness can accompany happiness. And like so, disappointment can come along great opportunity. So I think while constantly we are going through different phases of life, you're just in a different part of the cycle of blooming, dying to self, planting a seed, growing again, doing it over and over and over again. So we're blooming. We just don't know it sometimes. But I feel like I needed that reminder today, so thank you.
You're very welcome. In conclusion, what's a quote or a mindset or a mantra that you constantly go back to on your journey?
I don't know how relevant this is, but this is the one that always comes to me more times than often, is clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I learned that from Brene Brown. She's changed my life in multiple ways, that woman. She doesn't know, but she's my fairy godmother. Shout out Brene Brown.
She's prolific and she's a beautiful author.
I only found out about Theodore Roosevelt's piece, Man in the Arena, by reading her book. And I got it tatted on my arm, my grandma's handwriting. It says, I am the woman in the arena. And again, she's taught me so much. That could be one of it. But going back to that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. In so many parts of our lives, we can be so indecisive and just be yes and people and not necessarily speak our truth. But I think there's such power when you can be straightforward and you can give your answer. And I think regardless of what side you're sitting on, particularly if you're on the receiving end as well, I think being clear is kind regardless of what's being said, because you just know where you stand. Being unclear, being vague, living in that blur, it's shit. And I think when I try and think about how I treat people, how I go about my business, et cetera, it's clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So be clear, be concise. And when they walk away, they don't leave thinking about possible meanings. They just know exactly where they stand with you and vice versa.
I would agree that's important. And I know Brene Brown talks about, you know, you have to have those hard conversations. And oftentimes in life, we avoid those hard conversations because we don't want to offend that person. But to be clear is to just tell how it is.
Yeah.
And if that person belongs in your orbit, they'll take it on the chin and they'll do well with the information versus retaliating and, you know, ending up in an argument or what have you. I think people that want to be in your orbit will fight to be in your orbit.
I've never heard that. Be in your orbit. I like that. I'm going to take that, Dane.
You can steal that. That's all yours.
You.
Thank you so much. I just think you're such a beautiful spirit and you've got an incredible perspective on being an athlete as well as media. And I think that it's so cool that you're doing both. I just really want to champion that. And I just think that, you know, that's a superpower. So I'm really excited to see you commentate and do commentary at the Olympics. I'm going to tune in for sure. And yeah, you're just a beam of sunshine. Thank you for being here.
I received that. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a bloody blast being on your show.